Hey, what's going on everyone? In this review, we'll be looking at my favorite interpretation of the iconic Nu Gundam, the Master Grade High Nu Gundam, version Katoki. While I usually like to stick to Gundams that have a true anime appearance, the High Nu Gundam is one of those suits I have to make an exception for. I'm just a huge fan of its unique color scheme and bulky design. Not to mention it's an Amuro Ray suit, so even though it hasn't made a true anime appearance just yet, I just had to add this kit to my collection. Now, as always, we'll be looking at this Master Grade Gundam in 4 categories: the build, appearance, articulation, and the gimmicks. We'll be giving each a score from 1 to 5, so at the end we can tally it all up for an average score. Being a version Katoki, this should be a really interesting kit. Alright, now let's jump right into this build. Being released about 2 years after the Nu Gundam version Katoki, this High Nu Gundam's build was fairly similar. Not so much in terms of reused pieces or runners though, but more so in its general engineering cues. It uses similar ankle joints, hip mounts, and shoulder joints, just to name a few. However, lacking that retcon Psycho frame, this kit is noticeably more straightforward. For example, on the Nu Gundam, the thigh has a really interesting pull-out gimmick that reveals some green plastic underneath. It uses 4 or 5 unique pieces to create this effect. Meanwhile, this High Nu Gundam decides to go for the good old-fashioned polycap sandwich instead. Really, all traces of that Psycho frame transformation have been completely phased out, and instead replaced with some pretty bare-bones pieces. What's odd, however, is that this streamlining doesn't just stop at the Psycho frame, as quite a few additional details are missing too, like this nice sliding piston found in the forearm of the Nu Gundam, which is almost completely absent on the High Nu. In general, this build is quite a bit simpler than I anticipated. Still, despite this slimming down, this is by no means a boring build. Instead of that Psycho frame transformation, this High Nu Gundam focuses on an open hatch type gimmick that allows you to flip open specific armor plates to reveal inner frame or thrusters underneath. While not quite as in-depth as a Perfect Grades version, there's still quite a few hinges and sliding mechanisms peppered throughout this frame. Stack onto that a few pop-out gimmicks here and there, and this kit's build is sure to keep you interested. Moving on to this armor, the part separation here is extremely solid, leading to no real seam lines, no need for painting, and no bad nubs. Speaking of nubs though, much of this kit is undergated as well. This is just fantastic, because you know nubs and stress marks would be really prominent on this deep purple. Interestingly, when snapping on this armor to this inner frame, you have to make sure you plug everything in just the right order. These legs, for example, have a very strict order to get these thrusters and hatches working properly. Of course, this is more of a modern kit, so its manual does a great job of laying things out. Again, as complex as this build seems, it's surprisingly straightforward once you get into it. The only major flaw I found in this kit's build is how these fin funnels were implemented. See, this top section is actually a big white piece, with this faded purple being a combination of 3 water slide decals. Yeah, 3 water slide decals. And unfortunately, they're pretty weak. Seriously, I used decal setter and then top coated them. And still, a month or 2 later I noticed some mystery scratches and tears. They're just too big, and having to fold over the edges of these funnels really hurts their longevity. Part of me thinks I'd be better off taking my chances and painting them instead. By the way, the fin funnels are the only thing I've top coated on this kit so far. I really like to show off the quality of the plastic used in each of these kits. The cheap finish of, say, a late 90s Master Grade is very different from the nice deep colors of a more modern release, and I want these videos to reflect that, you know? Anyway, another aspect of this build requiring attention is this strange notch on the waist. At first I thought it was a mistake, as it prevents the chest from sitting flush against the waist, but nope, it's actually a way of offsetting the weight of the backpack. The gap it creates is completely covered up by its huge waist skirts. As brute force of a solution as this is, it does help mitigate weight issues, so I can't really complain here. Onto the detailing, there really isn't too much to do here. Once you get past those water slide decals and do some basic panel lining, you end up with a pretty amazing looking High Nu Gundam. The only touch-up I did was slap some black paint into a few of these vents and white circles, just to give them a bit more depth. Thankfully, they're all really easy to detail up, as the amazing part separation allows you to simply pop a vent off, paint the frame underneath, then plug the vent back in. Super convenient stuff. The build for this High Nu Gundam was surprisingly straightforward for a kit that bears the version Katoki title, At least it was outside of these water slide decals. Even so, this build was really amazing, deserving a near perfect 4.5 out of 5. This would be a really great kit for some intermediate builders looking to try out some more hefty builds. Now that we've got this guy built, let's see how he turned out. Starting with these proportions, they're just perfect. In my mind, the High Nu Gundam should have a more hefty design in comparison to the more standard Nu Gundam, and this kit does not disappoint. These leg thrusters and forearm gauntlets really beef up these limbs, and the massive skirt and shoulder armor do a great job of rounding out this hefty design. The chest is also a great centerpiece for this suit as well, with great color separation and a blocky design that cohesively connects these limbs together. The head is also in perfect proportion to this chest, being prominent but not too overbearing. Then you have this massive backpack that fills in what empty space remains. You put this kit in that iconic Katoki pose, and even if you're not into bulky designs, it's really hard to find a flaw with these proportions. The colors on this suit are also amazing. The white has this pristine brightness to it, but not so much that it becomes toyish. There's also a few slightly off-white pieces used for vents that do a good job of adding complexity to the base color without overloading you. Next we have this deep purplish violet that contrasts great with the base white. I'm really surprised with how saturated Katoki managed to get this purple without it looking too cheap. Lastly, the little amount of yellow that is in the chest goes a long way in spicing up this design. It has that nice orangish tinge that I like so much. All in all, these colors are just about flawless. Of course, if you did want to paint this kit up, thanks to the amazing part separation, it wouldn't be too difficult. However, my favorite aspect of this appearance is just how minimalist Katoki went with it. Really, taking off this backpack to simplify this a little bit, and you can see just how sparingly panel lines were used in this design. It works out great though, as there's already more than enough complexity found in these raised edges, small circular vents, and exposed inner frame. This really is a perfect mix of streamlined panels and minor details. Like all Katoki design suits, this kit comes with a ton of decals. Here are the leftovers from my build. There's a pretty decent mix of the usual caution signs, and more interesting model numbers and logos. Of course, I really love the simplicity of this design, so I decided to only use 3 or 4 logos in prominent places, just to add some character. Also, yes, they're all water slide. While that makes them way more time consuming to apply, you get a much cleaner finish that I'm sure more professional builders would really appreciate. Flat out, the appearance of this kit is just perfect. It kind of makes me wish that this was the version of the Nu Gundam seen in Char's counterattack. I know in a review I'm supposed to point out flaws, but there really aren't any with this appearance. It's gotta receive a perfect 5 out of 5. Not only does this kit look great out of the box, but because of the part separation and abundance of water slide decals, this would be a great base kit for more detailed custom builds. Now let's see what poses you can hit with this guy. As always, let's start with these feet. The toes can move up and down ever so slightly. Nothing crazy, but it's there. I do like these little extra spikes you can flip up. I'm sure they look really cool in some aerial poses. The ankles have all around great mobility. It's that same strange swivel ball mechanism used in the Nu Gundam version Katoki. You're really only limited here by the ankle guards. Despite the bulk of these legs, you get somewhere between a 135 and a 180 degree bend from this knee. Really solid stuff. The hips on this kit feature a swivel on a peg, so you get all the kicks, splits, and spins you could ask for. In general, these feet, legs, and hips allow for some really solid articulation from the waist down. Taking off this backpack, it's pretty crazy what you can do with such a bulky suit. His backpack does severely limit his ground poses though, so you'll probably want to get this guy into the air as quickly as possible. Thankfully, he comes with a dedicated stand right out of the box. Yeah, while this should probably go in the gimmick section, because of how useful it is in his articulation, I can't help but mention it here. Even though this isn't the most articulate stand, only having 2 positions for its arm, it more than serves its purpose. Getting him in the air is so great, as it actually allows you to make use of his above average mobility. The connection piece is also found just under the backpack, which means he has a very centric point of gravity when on this stand. But honestly, what I love most about this stand is how you can take off the top arm, attach an extra little foot to the bottom, and use it to help support the backpack in a standing pose. This is such an amazing idea, and I wish more back-heavy kits came with this feature. Back to this articulation though. These skirts have all-around solid movement. It's pretty great considering how large they are. The back skirts are also independent as well. There are a few joints inside this chest, but with the heft of the backpack and that notch in the waist, you're really limited to mild spins from a thick ball joint. These shoulder joints have a lot going on. You get solid pop-outs, in addition to all-around spectacular movement. The shoulder armor is on a hinge, so you can flip them up and out of the way a little bit. Working our way down the arm, they're pretty standard, with a 360-degree spin on top, a 135-degree bend from the elbow, and the wrist are on ball joints. Instead of the standard trigger finger split or pop-in fingers, this kit uses those 3.0 style hands. Each finger is independently articulated, giving you endless possibilities for posing. They're so much fun to mess with, however they can be pretty finicky. The articulated wrist specifically is pretty weak. Thankfully they do include pop-out pegs, so you don't have to be too precise with your finger placement. The head is on a ball joint, but the size here really limits its articulation. Like the new Gundam version Katoki, you can move the whole neck section upwards, which is a nice plus. Moving on to this backpack, the wings can spin pretty well, and that's about it. Of course, considering how heavy they are, this is probably for the best. Next, this big fin on the back can move up and down, allowing you to show off some of these thrusters underneath. Lastly, each of these fin funnels is attached to a dedicated hinge, which lets you move them around pretty well. Considering how bulky these limbs are and how heavy the backpack is, this really should have been a brick of a kit, but as it turns out, you can hit some pretty cool poses. At least when he's aerial. Of course, considering this kit comes with a dedicated stand that not only gets him off the ground, but can also support his standing poses, we have to give this articulation a perfect 5 out of 5. If there wasn't a dedicated stand here, I could see knocking it down a peg, but really as long as you can get him in the air, you have tons of posing options here. Lastly, being a version Katoki, this kit comes with a ton of extras, so let's dig in here. First up is his rifle. This thing looks amazing, with a nice mix of white and light gray pieces. It also has some solid part separation, making it easy to paint up. Personally, I just painted some of these details black, just to add a little more depth. This rifle does have weight issues though. While it does stay in the hand no problem thanks to those pegs, this gun is just a little too heavy for the wrist. I ended up cutting off a small piece of wall hanging strip I had sitting around, and used that to stick the butt of the rifle to his forearm. Not my most professional fix, but it works. Next are his beam sabers. I absolutely love this bright cyan color. It's so unique and complements this white and purple perfectly. Thankfully, they're much lighter than this rifle, so once you get the peg in place, he has no issue swinging them around. You get 2 blades and 3 handles by the way. 2 handles store in the backpack, and the other one in this really interesting pop-out gimmick in the left forearm. Also, the right forearm can pop open to reveal a sliding machine gun. It comes in all white though, but thanks to it being a separate piece, it only took a few minutes to paint up. You can also snap a beam saber in here if you wanted. On to my favorite gimmick of this kit, this huge shield. Unlike the new Gundam version Katoki's shield, this huge hunk of plastic goes for that minimalist look I love so much. This is such a clean and elegant design, and these vents that show through provide just the right amount of detail for me. It plugs into the back of the arm with a ball joint and a hinge, so while it isn't the most mobile shield I've ever seen, you can still get it facing slightly forward without having to awkwardly spin the arm entirely around. Lastly, for its basic arsenal, we have this bazooka. Like the rifle, I'm a huge fan of this mix of white and light gray. You can also hold it decently well, thanks to the handle being on a hinge. It does have a tendency to bump up against the wings though. Because of this, I much prefer to have it stored on the backpack. However, this bazooka does expand outwards, so it'll often slide down over time. Now for the real selling feature of this kit, these fin funnels. You know, despite the wear and tear on these water slide decals, I do think they look pretty solid when attached to the backpack. They both bulk the kit up and add some more of this beautiful purple to the design. However, once you detach them for some action poses, you're going to have some issues. You're supposed to be able to unfold them into an attack position, but sadly, there's no locking mechanism to keep them open. This means they'll almost immediately collapse on you. If you follow the manual exactly and fold the 2 joints in just the right way, then you might be able to get a few minutes out of them, but still, they're usually collapse when hit with a stray breeze. I found that by having these funnels supported sideways though, they aren't weighed down by gravity as much, which does help them stay open a bit longer. You can position these funnels using that dedicated stand and its 6 included arms. These arms can be a little limited in terms of articulation, only featuring 2 very tight swivels and a ball joint, but still, if you work at it, you can pull off some pretty decent poses here. so I wouldn't say these fin funnels are a total loss. They're more so just heavily flawed. Now onto that open hatch type gimmick I mentioned in the build. There are openable hatches found on the back of the legs, the back skirts, the chest vents, and the shoulder armor. Each one reveals thrusters or inner frame you could paint up. In all honesty, I was kind of expecting a little more here. Sure, it made the build more interesting, but the whole effect isn't as dramatic as I envisioned. Of course, I didn't paint up the inner frame or the thrusters, so the open hatches on my build don't really stand out here. Regardless, I think everyone can appreciate just how cool these expanded leg thrusters look. Lastly, like a lot of heftier kits from this time period, you can plug an LED into the chest to make the eyes and camera lenses light up. The manual said to go with green, but I thought I'd try out blue, just to mix things up. Regardless, I'm not the biggest fan of this LED gimmick. First off, you actually have to paint the black around the eyes, as there's no provided sticker or plastic piece that lets the eyes shine through. I also found excess light shining through the top mouth vent. For that, I painted a piece of masking tape black and stuck it to the top of the chin piece. That did a pretty good job of keeping the mouth section dark. Next, if you want to turn the LED on or off, you need to completely remove the backpack and head unit to flip the switch. This can be really rough, considering the size of the backpack and all these moving fin funnels. And lastly, even if you're cool with all of that, the actual effect really isn't that noticeable. Maybe it's the harsh lighting used in this review, but the LED really didn't stand out to me. I actually think the eyes would have been more prominent if I just used the regular sticker instead. And with that, I think we hit all these gimmicks. As usual, Katoki kits are packed with extras. Unfortunately, quite a few of these have issues. Still, there's just so much you can do with this kit that even if one or two of these gimmicks let you down, you have more than a few other options. So let's give these gimmicks a solid 4 out of 5. As long as you have some sticky tack for the rifle and quite a bit of patience for the fin funnels, you can rig up some really dynamic shots with this guy. Alright, it's time to wrap this all up here. The build was a 4.5 out of 5. It's more streamlined than the new Gundam version Katoki, but not so much that it's boring. The appearance was a perfect 5 out of 5. In my mind, this is the definitive take on the High New Gundam. The articulation was another 5 out of 5. You can hit way more poses than you'd expect, and the included stand eliminates weight issues. Lastly, the gimmicks received a 4 out of 5. He comes with a lot to work with, but there are quite a few issues here. Tallying all that up, dividing, and of course rounding, this Master Grade High New Gundam version Katoki receives a 4.6 out of 5. In terms of an unrounded percentage, it receives a 92.5%. So a high score for a version Katoki kit. Who would have thought, right? This is really an amazing kit. The build specifically was much simpler than you'd expect, making me think it'd be great for more intermediate builders looking to try out some more heftier kits. I'm also a huge fan of this appearance, as it really stands out compared to the new Gundam, with this beautiful purple color and fat proportions. The minimalist approach to panel line specifically was a really nice surprise too. The articulation was also really solid given his bulk. The only major issue with this kit is the fin funnels. These water slides are really just a big letdown. Also, you'd think Bandai and Katoki would have figured out a locking mechanism to keep these fin funnels open by now, especially considering the new Gundam had the exact same issues. I will say there's a premium Bandai expansion set that gives you little plastic inserts for the fin funnels. I'm sure they'd help keep these funnels open, but yeah, they're a premium Bandai exclusive, so not the most ideal fix. Still, despite the fin funnels having issues, the rest of this kit functions fantastically. Honestly, if you top coat these decals and keep the fin funnels attached to the backpack, it becomes really hard to find flaws with this kit. It's definitely worth picking up if you're a fan of the High New Gundam or version Katoki kits. He won't let you down either way. Alright, feel free to leave any questions you have about this kit below, and I'm more than happy to get back to you. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, where I post updates, work in progress builds, the whole deal. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.